Picture this. Court testimony revealed Tammy Moorer had her name tattooed on Sidney's body. According to police interviews, Tammy admitted tying Sidney to the bed after learning about his affair. Now, imagine that same woman discovering her husband's relationship with a 20-year-old waitress. What happens next? Prosecutors charged both Sidney and Tammy with murder, but later dropped that charge, focusing on kidnapping convictions instead. While both Moorers were convicted of kidnapping, murder charges never stuck for lack of a body. The truth behind Heather Elvis's disappearance is stranger than fiction. But Heather Elvis wasn't just a name in a missing persons report, it's another odd mystery. Join me for another strange, odd, and mysterious story here at Odd Mystery Stories. Heather Elvis grew up in Horry County, South Carolina, the middle child in a close-knit family. She was known for her creative spark, her love of animals, and her ambition. Friends and family remembered her as someone who blossomed with age. Her younger sister, Morgan, said Heather loved makeup and wanted to be in front of the camera. She didn't understand boundaries when it came to dreaming. She volunteered abroad and at a local animal shelter, always looking for ways to help others and make a difference. After graduating from St. James High School in 2011, Heather was already studying cosmetology and working as a waitress at the Tilted Kilt and House of Blues in Myrtle Beach. She shared an apartment with her best friend Brianna, balancing work, classes, and her social life. Coworkers described her as reliable and upbeat, someone who brought energy to every shift and genuinely cared about her friends. Her father, Terry, spoke of their daily texts and the strong bond that tied their family together. Everything changed in June of 2013 when Heather met Sidney Moorer at work. Sidney was 37, married, and a father. He started bringing her coffee, staying late after his maintenance shifts, and soon their conversations stretched late into the night. Friends and coworkers noticed the chemistry and warned Heather about getting involved, but the connection grew. By late summer, their relationship had turned into an affair, with hundreds of texts and secret meetings in parking lots. Heather's world started to revolve around Sidney, even as the risks grew clearer. As autumn arrived, Heather's loved ones noticed subtle changes. She seemed distracted, glued to her phone, and sometimes she left places without explanation. What they didn't see was the storm brewing behind the scenes. Sidney's wife, Tammy, had discovered the affair. Heather began finding taunting notes on her car and receiving anonymous cruel messages. Sidney would call Heather in tears, claiming Tammy forced him to end things, but he kept coming back. The tension only grew as the months passed. By December, Heather was trying to move forward. On December 17th, she went out with Stephen Schiraldi, dinner, Christmas lights, and a lesson in driving his stick-shift car. She even sent Brianna a photo, beaming from behind the wheel. Her last call to Brianna came at 1:44 a.m. Shortly before their call, Heather received a call from a payphone at 1:35 a.m. And records show she called that number again at 3:36 a.m. Around that same time, cameras caught Sidney's truck circling her apartment complex. By dawn, Heather's car was found abandoned at Peachtree Boat Landing. Her purse and keys were missing. In the weeks before her disappearance, Heather had become entangled with people who had their own secrets and motives. The choices made in those final days set the stage for everything that followed. And at the center of it all was a relationship that was never as simple as it seemed. Sidney Moorer was 37 when he started showing up at the Tilted Kilt nearly every day. Married for 14 years with 3 kids, he still found reasons to linger near Heather. Tilted Kilt staff saw them leave together after shifts, and soon their connection grew beyond casual banter. By late summer 2013, Heather and Sidney were exchanging up to 500 to 600 texts a month. Heather kept screenshots of Sidney calling her, quote, wifey, telling her he loved her. She confided to friends that Sidney promised he'd leave Tammy, and she wanted to believe him. Tammy Moorer, however, didn't turn the blind eye. She would appear without warning at Sidney's job sites, sometimes with their children in tow. Friends described how she tracked Sidney's phone and kept tabs on his whereabouts. When Tammy discovered messages from Heather in September, she confronted Sidney and forced him to call Heather on speakerphone. Heather's roommate, Brianna, overheard Sidney's trembling voice as he told Heather, quote, "This was just sex. You meant nothing." Heather was devastated, but communication between her and Sidney didn't end there. What followed was a campaign of intimidation. Heather began receiving anonymous texts, quote, "Does your father know you're a homewrecker?" And, quote, "Wait till everyone sees what you really are." Tammy left notes on Heather's car, including one with a photo of Sidney's new tattoo, her name, inked in bold script. Heather tried blocking numbers, but new ones kept appearing. By November, the messages grew more threatening. One read, quote, "Keep messing with my family and you'll disappear." Heather showed these to friends but chose not to report them, saying she didn't want to escalate things. Sidney continued to sneak back into Heather's life. On December 10th, a dark Ford F-150, matching Sidney's truck, was captured on Peachtree Road, cameras near Heather's apartment at 3:36 and 3:39 a.m. Phone records showed a 47-minute call between the two that same night. Some coworkers even made prank calls to Heather, blurring the line between concern and interference. Despite everything, Heather struggled to cut ties with Sidney. That week, Tammy's actions became even more extreme. She handcuffed Sidney to their bed, posting photos online with captions like, quote, "Mine forever." When Heather saw those images, she told Sidney it was over. But the story didn't end there. On December 18th at 2:07 a.m., Heather's phone received a call from a payphone near the Moorers' home. She called back 7 times in the next hour and a half, each call lasting exactly 4 seconds before disconnecting. Surveillance later showed someone wiping down the payphone after use. In the early hours of December 19th, both Sidney's and Tammy's phones pinged near Peachtree Boat Landing, the same place where Heather's car was later found abandoned. Heather's final message about Sidney, sent to her sister on December 11th, read, quote, "He says they're divorcing. I don't know what to believe anymore." The digital trail was damning, even as the Moorers stopped cooperating with police. What began as a secret relationship had now spiraled into something much darker. The lengths to which Tammy would go to keep control were only beginning to surface. Tammy Moorer's approach to the affair wasn't subtle. She seized control at every turn. When she learned about Sidney and Heather, her first move was to force Sidney to call Heather and end things while she listened in, making sure he told Heather she meant nothing. According to police statements, Tammy admitted handcuffing Sidney to their bed at night, determined to keep him from leaving. The control didn't stop there. Court testimony described Sidney's large lower stomach tattoo of Tammy's name, a permanent mark of her ownership that coworkers noticed as soon as he returned to work. Sidney's life became a series of restrictions. Tammy changed the password on his phone to one only she knew, cutting him off from private conversations. If he wanted to make a call or send a text, he had to ask Tammy for access. She monitored his every move, often accompanying him to job sites and following him in a separate car, sometimes with their children in tow. Neighbors recalled seeing Tammy shadow Sidney, never letting him out of her sight. Even when Sidney managed to sneak a call to Heather, Tammy seemed to appear moments later, forcing him to hang up. Heather wasn't spared from Tammy's campaign of intimidation. After the affair came to light, Tammy used both her and Sidney's phones to barrage Heather with threats, making at least 60 calls after discovering the relationship. One message read, quote, "Someone's about to get their beat down." Some calls came from numbers Heather didn't recognize, leaving her constantly on edge. Investigators later found that both Tammy's and Sidney's phones frequently pinged near Heather's workplace and home, suggesting she was being followed and watched. Tammy's fixation extended to monitoring Heather's movements in person. Phone records placed Tammy's device near Heather's job on multiple occasions, and friends reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles parked outside Heather's apartment for hours. The sense of being watched was constant, and the threats never seemed to stop. As December wore on, Tammy's grip tightened. She demanded Sidney erase every photo and message related to Heather, watching as he deleted the evidence. On December 25th, after investigators mentioned Google warrants, Tammy deleted her search history and Google data, details that would later raise more questions for police. During interviews, Tammy often spoke for Sidney, cutting him off mid-sentence and controlling the narrative. When asked about their whereabouts, she produced receipts for a Walmart visit, but surveillance showed only Tammy entering the store. By the time Heather's life intersected with Tammy's obsession, the atmosphere was thick with tension and fear. The stage was set, and all it would take was one night for everything to change. The night of December 17, 2013, Heather Elvis tried to turn the page. She spent the evening out with Stephen Schiraldi, dinner, Christmas lights, and a lesson in driving his manual car. Schiraldi dropped her off at her Myrtle Beach apartment at 1:15 a.m. on December 18th. For him, the night was over. For Heather, it was just beginning. At 1:35 a.m., Heather received a call from a payphone at a Kangaroo gas station. The call lasted 5 minutes, and on the other end was Sidney Moorer. After the call ended, Heather phoned her roommate, Brianna, who was out of town at the time. Their conversation lasted until 1:44 a.m. Heather told Brianna about Sidney's call and that he wanted to meet. Brianna urged her not to go and suggested she just get some sleep.
My exact words were, "Do not call Sidney back. Don't do anything rash. Go to sleep and we'll talk about it tomorrow."
When is the next time that you've heard from her?
I haven't.
But Heather's mind was already racing. Over the next hour, Heather called that payphone back 9 times, each time getting no answer. Her phone pinged at several spots around Myrtle Beach, including Longbeard's Bar and Grill and Augusta Plantation Drive, as if she was driving in circles, uncertain about what to do next. At 3:16 a.m., Heather tried Sidney's cell. He didn't answer at first, but a minute later they connected for a 4-minute call. Whatever was said, it was enough to send Heather out of her apartment towards Peachtree Landing. Surveillance footage from a private residence captured Sidney's dark Ford F-150 heading down Peachtree Road at 3:36 a.m. and then again at 3:39 a.m. Just a minute after the second sighting, Heather's phone pinged at Peachtree Landing between 3:37 and 3:38 a.m. Her car arrived at the deserted boat ramp. Once there, Heather made 3 unsuccessful calls to Sidney's phone, followed by another attempt at 3:41 a.m. Her phone last data point was logged at 3:42 a.m. in the Waccamaw National Wildlife Refuge. After that, there was only silence. When the sun came up, a passerby found Heather's silver Hyundai abandoned at Peachtree Landing. The keys were still in the ignition, her purse sat on the seat, and the car faced the water. There were no signs of a struggle, just a car left behind, headlights off, and no trace of Heather. In the days that followed, new details raised even more questions. Surveillance from December 18th showed Sidney at the Kangaroo payphone, despite his initial denial, and Walmart cameras captured him buying a pregnancy test and cigars at 1:12 a.m. 4 days later, on December 22nd, cameras caught Sidney and Tammy power washing the back passenger side of their truck and then burning rags in their backyard fire pit. The timing and secrecy drew suspicion, especially as investigators pieced together the timeline. Sidney shifted his story, first denying, then admitting the payphone call, and claiming the pregnancy test was for Tammy. Phone records showed his truck leaving Peachtree Landing at 3:46 a.m., just minutes after Heather's phone went dark. Police searching the Moorer home found handwritten notes between Sidney and Tammy, appearing to coordinate their stories. With no body, no blood, and no obvious crime scene, the only clues left were digital trails, surveillance images, and the strange behavior of those involved. The search for answers was just beginning. Detectives face a case unlike any they'd seen. No body, no blood, no physical evidence left at Peachtree Boat Landing, and just Heather's abandoned car and a digital trail that told its own story. With so little to work with, investigators leaned heavily on cell phone records and surveillance footage. These digital clues became the backbone of the case, revealing a pattern of calls and movements that drew a tight circle around the Moorers. Phone records showed Heather's last calls were not to friends or family, but to Sidney's cell and a payphone near Walmart, all within the early morning hours of December 18th. Pings from both Sidney and Tammy's phones placed them in the same cell tower area as Heather's calls near Peachtree Landing, right around the time her phone went silent. Surveillance footage from nearby home and businesses captured Sidney's black Ford F-150 heading toward the landing at 3:36 and 3:39 a.m., a timeline that matched the data from Heather's phone. When confronted, Sidney denied being there, but changed his story once detectives showed him the footage. Tammy's story didn't hold up either. She claimed she was home all night, but Walmart cameras caught her entering the store at 1:12 a.m. That same hour, Sidney was seen at the Kangaroo gas station payphone, making the call to Heather. Cell phone data showed both Moorer's devices moving in the direction of Peachtree Landing during those critical hours. Adding to the suspicion, Sidney was seen buying a pregnancy test at Walmart that night. Despite telling police he and Tammy hadn't been intimate in months. The timing of the purchase, combined with rumors about Heather possibly being pregnant, gave investigators a potential motive. Neighbors reported seeing the Moorers cleaning their black Ford 150 on December 22nd, focusing on the back seat area, and burning rags in their backyard fire pit that morning. When police searched the Moorer home, they found handwritten notes between Sidney and Tammy, lists of times and locations as if they were rehearsing alibis. Meanwhile, the Elvis family's pleas for information played out in public, while the Moorers stopped cooperating with police and refused polygraph tests. Tammy's calm demeanor and odd smiles in interviews only added to the suspicion. With no physical evidence, the case relied on these digital breadcrumbs and the Moorers' conflicting statements. The prosecution built the case on motive, opportunity, and a troubling pattern of behavior. But the lack of body made everything more difficult. The community split. Some saw the Moorers' actions as clear signs of guilt, while others pointed out the case was built on circumstantial evidence. As the investigation moved forward, every detail, every phone ping, every surveillance frame, every contradiction became fuel for the legal battle ahead. The courtroom drama over Heather Elvis's disappearance brought every detail of the case under a harsh spotlight. Sidney Moorer's first trial for kidnapping ended with a mistrial on June 24, 2016, after 7 hours of jury deliberations left 10 jurors ready to convict and 2 holding out. The defense leaned hard on the circumstantial nature of the evidence. No eyewitness, no body, no direct link to Sidney. Not long after, Sidney was sentenced to 5 months in jail for violating a gag order when he spoke to the media, calling the prosecution, quote, malicious, and criticizing the jury's impartiality. Tammy Moorer's legal battle unfolded next. After a mistrial hearing in July of 2017, Her trial for kidnapping and conspiracy to commit kidnapping began on October 15, 2018. Lasting 11 days and drawing heavy media attention, prosecutors highlighted Tammy's jealousy, the threatening texts she sent to Heather, and the way she controlled Sidney, citing court testimony about the tattoo and her admitted handcuffing of Sidney at night. Tammy took the stand herself, insisting she'd resolved issues with Heather after a, quote, nice conversation, the month before the disappearance. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial and tried to frame Tammy's behavior as part of an open marriage, but the jury deliberated just 4 hours before convicting her on both charges. Tammy received 2 concurrent 30-year sentences. Sidney's retrial for kidnapping followed in September of 2019. This time, the prosecution focused on video surveillance of Sidney's truck near Peachtree Boat Landing and phone records linking him to that payphone that called Heather. The jury reached a verdict in 2 hours, guilty of kidnapping and conspiracy, with another 30-year sentence. The lack of physical evidence shaped every aspect of the trials. Prosecutors had to build their case on digital evidence, surveillance, and witness testimony. No blood or body was ever found. The infamous pregnancy test Sidney brought at Walmart couldn't be tied to Heather. The absence of a body meant murder charges weren't possible, leaving the convictions to rest on the strength of circumstantial proof. Both Moorers filed appeals. Sidney's were denied by the South Carolina Court of Appeals and Supreme Court. Tammy's legal team argued her alibi witnesses were strongly barred and challenged the admissibility of the state's expert on vehicle identification. Neither argument convinced the appellate courts. Sidney also faced an obstruction of justice trial. On August 30, 2017, a jury found him guilty of lying about the payphone call to Heather, a lie exposed by surveillance footage. He received a maximum 10-year sentence with credit for time served. These trials showed just how difficult it is to prosecute no-body cases. The convictions relied on digital trails and the Moorer's own words. But the fundamental mystery remained. Heather's family found some measure of justice, but the truth about what happened at Peachtree Landing stayed just out of reach. Even as the legal battles played out, another storm was brewing, one that wouldn't be confined to the courtroom. Social media quickly became the loudest voice in Heather Elvis's case. From the earliest days of her disappearance, the internet filled with rumors, theories, and accusations. Many aimed straight at the Elvis family. Anonymous accounts and fake Facebook profiles sprang up, some allegedly linked to Tammy Moorer herself. These accounts shared photos of Heather with captions implying she was unstable or simply had run away. One even accused Heather's father of hiding information, a baseless claim that spread like wildfire through online forums. The harassment didn't stay online. Supporters of the Moorers began photographing the Elvis family during searches, posting the images with mocking captions. Someone went so far as to create a Monopoly-style board game featuring the Elvis family as the pieces. A cruel joke that stung even more because it was shared so widely. Morgan Elvis, Heather's sister, found her personal information leaked alongside memes accusing her of harming Heather. The family asked police for help, but at the time, laws did little to address online harassment. The attacks continued, compounding the family's grief and making their search for answers even harder. Tammy Moorer kept a tight grip on the story, using social media to shape public perception. She posted on Facebook, suggesting Heather was troubled and hinting that police should look more closely at the Elvis family. In one post, she wrote, quote, "People disappear every day. Maybe she didn't want to be found." Sidney's sister, Ashley, reportedly managed several anonymous accounts, targeting anyone who pointed fingers at the Moorers. The noise from these efforts often drowned out real leads, burying legitimate tips under layers of conspiracy theories and false claims. Internet sleuths added to the chaos. Well-meaning but misguided, they pored over every scrap of evidence. sometimes harassing witnesses or spreading unverified rumors. The idea that Heather was pregnant with twins began with nothing more than Sidney's late-night purchase of a pregnancy test. Other rumors suggested drug involvement or human trafficking, despite investigators finding no evidence for either. Police had to spend valuable time publicly debunking these stories, which only slowed the investigation. Even after the convictions, the digital storm continued. Campaigns like Free Tammy Moorer painted her as a victim, while true crime forums endlessly rehashed the case, often recycling disproven theories. The Elvis family pleaded for privacy, asking people to remember Heather as a person, not as just a headline or an internet obsession. The Heather Elvis case is a stark example of how social media can distort reality. Online attacks and conspiracy theories didn't just complicate the investigation, they deepened the family's pain and made it even harder to find the truth. The noise is still out there, with forums and threads dissecting every detail, rarely pausing to consider the real people at the heart of the story. And with so much left unresolved, the questions haven't faded, they've only grown louder. More than a decade has passed since Heather Elvis disappeared, yet the central mysteries of her case remain as troubling as ever. The investigation is still open, her body has never been found, and her family lives with the daily ache of not knowing what truly happened. Multiple searches of the marshes around Peachtree Boat Landing have yielded nothing. Even when cadaver dogs alerted near the Moorers' former property, no physical evidence surfaced. Without Heather's remains, prosecutors relied entirely on circumstantial evidence, leading to kidnapping convictions for Sidney and Tammy Moorer, but never murder. The lack of closure haunts every detail. The timeline of that night raises difficult questions. Heather's car arrived at Peachtree Landing at 3:38 a.m. Surveillance cameras caught Sidney's truck on Peachtree Road minutes before, yet the 4 minutes between her arrival and her phone going silent suggest more than a simple abduction. Was someone else involved? Did Heather meet someone she trusted, or did she feel trapped from the moment she arrived? The Moorers burned rags in their backyard the next morning, but investigators never found out exactly what, if anything, was destroyed. Despite extensive cleaning, no blood or physical evidence was ever recovered from Sidney's truck. Sidney's repeated appeals have kept the case in the spotlight. His most recent post-conviction relief application argued jury intimidation and withheld evidence, claims that courts have consistently rejected. Still, every new legal filing reopens old wounds for Heather's family and underscores how difficult it is to secure justice without a body. Could advances in forensic technology someday reveal what was missed? Could a fresh look at old evidence finally break the silence? Through all of this, the Elvis family has refused to give up. They gather for vigils and birthdays, organize fundraisers, and keep Heather's memory alive on social media and through documentaries. Her father Terry still sends text messages to her old number, holding on to hope that one day there will be an answer. They want more than convictions. They want to bring Heather home. What happened during those last 4 minutes at Peachtree Landing? Why did Heather go there, and what did she expect to find? The payphone calls, the unanswered questions, and the silence from those who know more keep the mystery alive. As long as Heather remains missing, the puzzle is incomplete, and her family's search for truth continues. Even with convictions in place, Heather Elvis's story is far from over. Sidney and Tammy Moorer remain in prison for kidnapping, but the absence of Heather herself leaves a void that legal outcomes can't fill. Authorities still treat the case as active, urging anyone with information to step forward. The lack of physical evidence means the full truth remains just out of reach. Heather's father, Terry, has spoken about the family's hope for answers, and their determination never wavers. What do you think happened that night? Could someone still hold the key to finding Heather? Share your thoughts below. Every detail matters. Hey, thanks for sticking with me through another odd mystery. My name is Vince. If you enjoyed this story and want to help keep the channel going, consider buying me a coffee or joining the Patreon crew. Even a few bucks goes a long way toward uncovering more strange and unsolved cases. Patreon members get special recognition for subscribing. Some even see the research notes on what's coming next. And more members even help pick the next case. You'll find links in the description. Thanks again for watching. Stay curious and stay safe. Thank you.